Welcome in, everybody. This is our very first episode of Morons and a Mic. My name is Cody McCauley, and I am moron number one with a mic. And we kind of wanted to start this podcast with some spicy hot takes for the 2024 season. And when I mean hot takes, they are scalding hot takes. But before we get into it, I will let my co-host introduce himself a little bit.
Hi, guys. I'm Ted Kinney. We started this podcast because we both just love to talk about fantasy football. So we figured, why not do it with an audience? We like to try different leagues. I know this year, for example, is my first time playing a guillotine league and a vampire league. If you guys don't know what those are, you should definitely check it out. And so, without further ado, let's get into some of these takes. Cody, what's your first quarterback take for us?
All right, so my first quarterback take is regarding a rookie quarterback. You may know who this is, a guy by the name of Jayden Daniels. And I'm calling it now. I'm going with Jayden Daniels being a top 5 quarterback this year. And here's why. All right, so Cliff Kingsbury, after he got fired and ran off to Thailand or wherever he ran off, he just got hired by the Washington Commanders this offseason. And he is the guy that basically turned Kyler into a top 12 quarterback every year he was there, including Kyler's rookie year. And one of Kyler's best features is his ability to run, which is also Jayden Daniels' best feature right now. But you can't discount his passing ability. According to Pro Football Focus, he graded out as having the best mechanics among rookie quarterbacks at the combine. Plus, you still have Scary Terry there. You've got Luke McCaffrey, and if as a Niners fan, if you know anything about the McCaffreys, it's that they're all beasts. Plus, they brought in some savvy veterans to be great outlets for him, and Eckler, Ertz, even Jamison Crowder. What do you think? That's spicy enough? That's spicy enough for our first one?
That's definitely a scalding hot take. So I love Jayden Daniels as a prospect. My concern and why I got to disagree on this, or at least rate it a 5 in spiciness. As part of the terms and conditions of watching this podcast, no one can hold us responsible for if these things don't happen because it's a hot episode.
Exactly.
So the only things that I could see, again, has nothing to do with Jayden Daniels. Being a top 5 quarterback is hard. And the Washington offensive line is charitably described as not great.
And it means he's going to run a lot.
It does mean he's going to run a lot, but the problem is, look, man, I think we all saw Jayden Daniels and some of those hits he took at LSU. The man has the mechanics of a rag doll getting hit.
They say, doctors say when you get in really bad accidents, the people that get hurt the most are the ones that tense up and try to brace.
Which means
he doesn't brace. He just ragdolls, and he's going to be fine.
Yeah, he's never going to get hurt. Confirmed. No injuries ever for Jayden Daniels.
We can only hope. We can only hope.
All right.
I'm calling it. At least 600 yards rushing.
I think that's very reasonable. I think it's underselling him a little bit. But, all right, I'm gonna get into my hot take. Now, I hadn't heard this one. I hadn't heard this one before yesterday. So I do feel a little bit like I got sniped by Matt Harmon. Matt Harmon's awesome if you guys don't know who that is. Anyways, my hot take here is that Kyler Murray, and I'm going to make it extra spicy, he's going to be the QB1. He's going to be the overall QB1 this year. And I'll tell you why. So last year, coming off of a torn Achilles, or not Achilles, I'm sorry, off of a torn ACL, Kyler Murray in his 8 healthy games, he had 200-ish rushing, 220 rushing yards, which over a full season of 17 games would equate to around 500 rushing yards. And we know that rushing ability takes a hit in that first year post-ACL tear, especially for a guy like Kyler, whose game is built so much on speed and just being, a human turbo machine.
Yeah, he's more shifty than anything. I wouldn't call him
No,
like the
he's
fastest
outright
guy out
fast too.
there.
Don't get me wrong, he's outright fast. But yes, his shiftiness is like off the friggin' charts.
Yeah, he's not Anthony Richardson fast.
He is damn close to as fast. The problem is he's about 6 inches shorter. Anyways, so the rest of the reason that I think he's QB1 overall is the last time that we saw him with a really good pass catcher was veteran DeAndre Hopkins, right? So D-Hop wasn't quite prime D-Hop, but he wasn't far off either. He had the QB3 finish. And I know you just mentioned Cliff Kingsbury as a positive, but let's be real here. That man is not a good OC. I'm not saying he's not now.
What?
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not now. He might have learned some stuff. He might have learned about play action.
He was a terrible head coach. He's a great OC.
But too often it seemed like the Cardinals' offense devolved into Kyler save us, and that's not going to lead to down consistency. Kyler has all the talent in the world, and now we see a team that has built an identity. They have a run first team. If you look at their starting lineup, they're freaking huge. Their offensive line is massive. Trey McBride is massive. They drafted that kid Tip Ryman in the 3rd round. He's like 270 pounds at tight end. And then you have Marvin Harrison Jr. lined up outside. He's 6'4", 220, whatever he is. Then you have Michael Wilson Jr. on the other side, who is 6'2", 2 whatever.
Who I drafted last year, so I still have him. I got hopes.
You have a team of gargantuan human beings, but oh, by the way, you also have to account for Kyler Murray in the run game as well. You have to account for Marvin Harrison Jr. with his talent as a receiver. You have to account for Trey McBride as a receiver. Michael Wilson showed a lot of good things. So how do you play this team offensively? I think Kyler Murray is set up for a huge year.
I think one thing you have to ask yourself is, you keep talking about how gargantuan this offensive line is. How is Kyler going to see over the top?
Man, that's an issue that Kyler has dealt with before, and he was, again, QB3 last year. So here's the thing about Kyler. He is being drafted right now as QB9 in ESPN leagues. Mm-hmm. He has never, in a healthy season, finished as worse than QB5 in points per game. Not once. He's always had that. But now he has an actual coherent offense. Mm-hmm. He has a pair of elite pass catchers in Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. He has options for the first time in his career.
Can he pass that bitch like Stockton?
Yeah, and we'll just hop in.
All right, perfect. Hey, I'm glad you changed that into a top 1 instead of, what did you start off as a top 5, then you went top 3. I think changing it to top 1 is the appropriate level of spice, because top 5, I could easily see that. Top 3, we're starting to waver here, but it's in the realm of possibilities. Now, keep in mind, he does have to play the Niners twice.
Hey, look, as someone with an unhealthy amount of Kyler on his fantasy teams, the more I thought about it, the more I talked myself into QB1. All right?
It's easier to talk yourself into something when they're already on your team. So,
yeah. So I'm taking full advantage of that.
Fair enough. I still think I still think I'm spicier. Real quick before I get into my
spicy takes yet.
Real quick before I get into my second quarterback, I want to you talked about different leagues that you're in. Kind of explain to the viewers what a Vampire League is and what a Guillotine League is.
So we go to the Vampire League first. Vampire League, you have however many teams, 10, 12, 14, whatever it is. And based on the size of the league, you have 1 or 2 so-called vampires, right? So the Vampire League I'm in, it's a 12-team league. We have 2 vampires because it is a bigger league. When you do your draft, the vampires do not draft anybody real. Now, in our league, we had sleepers, so I don't know how to just skip picks without having somebody draft. So what we did is we scrolled all the way down to people that are projected for 0 points, me and the other vampire, and then we picked those guys.
We're talking people like Kenyon Barner.
Yeah, and Cam Newton. I mostly made it a Duck love fest, though. You know, Johnny Johnson. Shout out to all the former Ducks out there. If you're on Sleeper, I drafted you, so appreciate you. Anyways, so the two vampires don't get to draft at all. As soon as the draft is over, they build their teams through waivers.
Mhm.
They, for the entire season, have permanent access, permanent priority to the waivers. In our league, I'm going to lock the waivers on Tuesdays. The vampires get to make their claims, do whatever they need to do. Before Wednesday and Thursday, it'll open back up for the rest of the league because, I mean, it's a long season. Injuries happen. We don't want them to, not have a good time with it.
Right.
And then, and here's where it gets fun. So the vampire, as they play, obviously their team starts terrible. They usually luck into a win or two, from what I've read. At least in the first couple of weeks, they luck into a win. Once they win some games, though, that team gets real good real fast because they, upon beating a team, can steal anybody that started in that week against them from that team that beat them.
So what you're saying is, if I'm playing you, make sure it's my bye week for all my players, including the ones that are actually playing. I'm just going to bench them all. And then you can't take anything from me, right?
You can only have 5. It's a short bench. I know you're in that league too. I made it a short-ish bench of what I think it's 5-man bench, right?
6. You changed it to 6 right before we drafted.
That's right.
But here's a question for you: who is your favorite player that didn't get drafted that you were able to pick up off the waivers for that team?
So I got a couple. So as the vampire, you need to embrace the high risk, high reward strategy. Like if a guy's going to get you 4 catches for 40 yards, that doesn't really move the needle because you're going to have somebody else in that lineup that lays a dud. So one of my favorite guys was Rashid Shaheed, actually, the Saints receiver.
Yeah,
because last year he had 3 weeks where he was a top 15 receiver, including
Derek
1
Carr
week
likes the guy
because he had 3 catches for 153 yards and a touchdown. It seems like a stat line I'd put up in a video game, but he put it up for real. So again, that's the type of guy who he catches 2 passes. It could be 2 long touchdowns. You know what I mean?
right.
So he's on my team, and he was one of my favorites for sure. I think another one. Let me look at my team real quick here. Another one that I did pick up was Jerome Ford, who I was really surprised didn't get picked in ours.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't get drafted.
But yeah, those two were my favorite for sure.
Okay, all right. And before we get into the guillotine, you said high risk, high reward, so that actually takes me right into quarterback number 2 for me, and that's going to be Danny Dimes being a top 10 quarterback this year. As we all know, the Giants have been terrible for quite some time. They no longer have Saquon, but they still have Danny Dimes, and he's a quarterback. I don't know how else to say it.
An athletic quarterback.
He's there. The guy can run when he's not being tripped up by the turf monster. And
that turf monster will get you, though.
They will, right? I still remember that run. There was nobody in front of him. He was maybe, 5 yards from the end zone? 10
so he started to trip about 15 or 20. You could see his leg. You could see him getting out over his legs a little too far. He made it all the way down to the 5, though.
But, in his last healthy season, which was 2022, he was actually the QB9. So that's already, we've got the benchmark that it could happen. Now that team was a lot different. He had Saquon to lean on. But he also now has Brian Daboll, who's going to be calling the plays. He hadn't done that in his first 2 years as head coach with the Giants. But we saw what he could do as the offensive coordinator for Josh Allen. So if he can do the same thing with, Danny Dimes, who doesn't have the talent of Josh Allen, but he has the ability to do some of the same things with his legs and stuff like that. He also has an absolute stud in Malik Nabers.
Love Nabers.
They drafted him 5th overall. That's the highest the Giants have ever drafted a wide receiver in their history. And he's already per Pro Football Focus, he's already the 25th best ranked wide receiver in football. So that tells you something. He's got somebody just who's a monster. And of course, he still has Steve Slayton, which Steve Slayton is good for one
you mean
or
Darius
two.
Slayton?
Yes, that one.
Yeah,
he's still good for one or two games every year where he gets 3 touchdowns out of nowhere, and then does nothing for the rest of the year. But he has the ability to run, and he has a good play caller, and he's done it before. So it's less of a super spicy take, I think.
it's a mild.
But that offensive line still has problems. So
That offensive line has big problems. Yeah. I mean, Evan Neal, the fact that he's not a starter 2 years after being a top 10 pick is that's a rough look. But I'm actually really intrigued their wide receiver room, and I love Matt Harmon, love his stuff. So on this podcast, I'll use the reception perception a lot. And one of the things that Matt Harmon talks about is the sacrificial X receiver. The guy that lines up on the line, runs the deep routes, but doesn't really get targeted all that much because he's running clear out routes. And I think that the Giants have a fairly interesting receiver core because they drafted Jalen Hyatt last year, who profiled as an X receiver, stretch X receiver, and that's exactly what I think he's going to do. I don't think Danny Dimes is going to be throwing the ball downfield to him all that much. I don't know if Jalen Hyatt's all that great an X receiver yet, but it allows them to move Malik Neighbors around the formation, slot, flanker, get him in motion, do all those fun things that a guy with the athletic ability of Neighbors, you want him to be able to do.
So I also don't know if Daniel Jones can throw it that far down the field. So
no, he can.
That remains to be seen. I don't think
just
we've
not
seen
with
it
an
very
NFL level pass rush. That's his thing. All right, so I'm gonna go real spicy here.
Spicier than your okay.
I think it's spicier than the Kyler Murray QB1.
All right.
But I think there's some really good underlying stats behind it. And it's a little bit of a vibes thing, too. So my second one is that Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Famer, is going to be outside the QB20 range this year for fantasy football. That's pretty spicy, right?
I don't like that.
So let me back it up.
What, is he going to tear his Achilles or something again?
Look, he's a 40-year-old QB coming off of a torn Achilles. We can't discount the injury possibility. I never hope for injuries, right? But it is something that you have to be aware of, especially considering the Jets are kind of a house of cards. If you look up and down that lineup, right, and this is before we get to Rodgers himself, but if you look up and down that lineup, their left tackle is Tyron Smith, who was the great, Dallas left tackle for a long, long time. That dude's going to miss 4 or 5 games, like every year, clockwork. Their right tackle is, what's his name? Moses from Washington, played for Washington. Anyways, Morgan Moses, I think is his name. He's going to miss time. Like he's in his 30s, offensive lineman in the 30s. They miss time, especially when you have an injury history like him. Now, they did prep a little bit for that. They drafted Olu Fashanu from Penn State at 12, I think it was, in the first one this year. But like a rookie left tackle who's playing swing tackle, really, and only playing when those two guys are not playing, that's not great. And then also, if you look at their receiver room, what is going on? Aside from Garrett Wilson, who is outstanding, who the hell do they have? They have Mike Williams coming off a torn ACL. That dude's going to miss time. He misses time every year. Speaking as a Chargers fan, I love Mike Williams. I hope Mike Williams stays healthy and kills it this year. But if you're building a team, you have to count the fact that dude's going to miss time. And who do they have? Who do they bring in? Aside from that, they brought in Malachi Corley. He's an exciting player with the ball in his hands, but his route tree at Western Kentucky, he is not an NFL-level route runner. He is a gadget guy. You're going to get him the ball and screens and stuff. They don't have anybody that can win on routes aside from Garrett Wilson. That's the rest of the
Mike Williams.
And Mike
Williams
can
win on routes when he's healthy.
Provided he's healthy.
But here's the thing. When has Aaron Rodgers ever needed a number 2 wide receiver?
See, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Aaron Rodgers
He
isn't the
doesn't
same
need
guy.
one.
Aaron Rodgers isn't the same guy as he was 5 or 10 years ago. And this is where my prediction rests a little bit on Rodgers. When we saw him the last year with the Packers in 2022, before he went to the Jets, he was looking old. So to be a good fantasy QB at this point, because there's a lot of really good QBs, you have to bring something with your legs, which 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming off a torn Achilles, he ain't doing. You have to throw a shit ton of touchdown passes, which, yeah, he's going to throw some to Garrett Wilson, but do we trust Nathaniel Hackett to scheme up stuff? Because we have a lot of evidence that says Nathaniel Hackett is not a good
No,
offensive
I forgot Nathaniel Hackett was there.
Yeah, trust me, I didn't. And then they have Breece Hall, who's a friggin' monster, and that kid Braylon Allen has looked really good. So, I mean, all these ingredients are there. They're probably going to run the ball a lot in the red zone.
It is a defensive-minded head coach.
Yep, injuries happen, and even if they don't, the QBs that are going around Rodgers all bring more with their legs. So if Rodgers loses a few passing touchdowns, all of a sudden we are talking about QB 21. 22.
Okay.
I know
I
I'm not
see
saying
that.
it's going to happen. Again, terms and conditions of this podcast, we can't be held responsible for this. So when Rodgers puts up, a top 10 QB season.
I mean, he put up an MVP season the year before his last year with Green Bay.
That's true, but he also had Matt LaFleur calling plays. Nathaniel Hackett is not Matt LaFleur.
But he's had Hackett before.
He has.
He's had Hackett before and still produced with Hackett. I think Aaron Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks that can win no matter who is calling his plays, because
Aaron Rodgers,
if he doesn't like it, he's just going to change it at the line.
Right. Aaron Rodgers, who had the athleticism to escape. I mean, look, I'm just saying.
We don't know that he doesn't anymore.
No, we do. Look, man, he had already stopped running. Really, stop.
I'm not expecting him to run. I'm just saying he's still mobile behind the line of scrimmage.
But therein lies the issue. Tua Tagovailoa led the NFL in passing yards last year.
Mm-hmm.
He finishes QB 18.
Well, I mean,
because he doesn't bring anything with his legs. Right, but I'm saying do we expect Aaron Rodgers to lead the NFL in passing yards? I think that would be a crazy good season for him. But if you can lead the NFL in passing yards 5 and finish QB 18,
yeah.
If you don't, I mean, it's a spicy take for sure. But I'm just saying he has the ingredients of somebody that finishes as a disappointment. But we spent too much time on the QBs.
All right, let's move on to the running backs.
Hold on one second.
Nope.
I got to give a shout out to my former Duck QBs. Hope Bo Nix and Justin Herbert kill it. Bo, don't kill it too much against the Chargers. Let's move on to the running backs.
Real quick. Herbert is a fantastic quarterback. He is in a terrible situation for the type of quarterback he is. But we're going to move on.
We'll move on.
We're moving on.
Moving on. Keeping it moving.
All right, running backs. My first running back, it's going to be Zamir White, being a top 12 running back. He's going to be a number 1. Over the last 3 weeks of 2023, we saw him be the RB12. He is he ranked at 13 out of 41 in explosive run rate, 6th in yards after contact, and 17 in success rate. The volume is there. His coach loves running the ball. They've got a killer 2 tight end set, and everyone knows 2 tight end sets are just deadly. Just ask the Patriots. And they're going to want to take the pressure off Gardner Minshew. As much swag as Gardner Minshew has,
swag king.
Yep. He is the king of swag. He's a swag king. He is not going to be that quarterback that wins you games with 350, 400-yard passing games. That's just not who he is. So, run the ball, establish the run, the volume will be there. And that's why it's pretty easy, simple explanation of why I think he's going to be a RB1 this year.
I can see it, but the reason that I think that's a spicy take is I think he'd have to really kill it on the ground. So again, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but this is why I think it's spicy, because people are going to hear that. If you guys listening heard that, I know it sounds pretty simple, rushing yards, right? Top whatever
But he
finish.
still has to contend with Anthony Madison too.
Well, Madison, I'm sorry, Alexander Madison showed last
Alexander,
year.
not Anthony.
But he's just not he's not a threat. I'm not worried about Alexander Madison. What I'm worried about,
but he can take touches away.
Is what I don't why I could see him not hitting that projection is simply because he doesn't catch that many passes. To be a high level running back in PPR leagues, which is the standard scoring in ESPN, so we're kind of basing it on that. You got to catch passes. Zamir White has not been used in the passing game. They drafted Dylan Laub, who the coaches have loved during the preseason, and then Amir Abdullah too. But I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying
I don't think we've seen Abdullah do anything his whole career, so I'm not really worried about
except
him.
Take a slightly annoying amount of touches away from better players.
Well, that's true. He could get that annoying third down roll.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna hit you with one, and this is pretty spicy. This is this might I think this is my spiciest running back take for sure. I'm calling it now. Jalen Wright, top 20 running back. Yes, the number 3 running back in Miami, top 20, and here's why. We saw last year, Mike McDaniel is an outstanding play caller. And what do all those running backs, Mostert, Achane, and our boy Jalen Wright have in common? They are freakishly fast. Track meet.
Fuck boy.
That's fuck boy. Yes, fast. Speed kills. And we saw it last year. Mike McDaniel is one of the best people in this league at getting people into space. So we saw Mostert, 21 touchdowns last year. That man didn't have 10 his whole career before that, excluding the playoff, you Niners fan, because I know you're about to say it. He didn't have 10 his whole career before that. Achane came in and averaged 7.5 or 8 yards per carry. That's crazy. That shouldn't be possible in the NFL. And here's why I think Achane is top 20. Or not Achane, I'm sorry. Jalen Wright is top 20. Mostert is 32 years old. He has a history of injuries. Again, I never want an injury to happen. Mostert and Achane are both very exciting players. I hope they play 17 games. I hope they kill it. But it is a reality of the NFL. Injuries happen, especially with somebody like with that injury history, and with Achane's own injury history and his slight stature. If either of those guys get hurt, Jalen Wright, who again averaged 7.5 yards per carry in the SEC last year, runs a 4.3 something 40, and he's bigger than Achane too. His burst score, which is a measure of that size and speed,
right,
is in the 96th percentile.
Sounds pretty good.
You can't pack the box against him because you got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside too. All it takes is one injury. If one of those guys goes down, Jalen Wright is so good and such a perfect fit for that offense. He's going to be a top 20 running back.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this spicy hot take is built more around an injury happening to Mostert or Achane.
Correct.
more based off that than his skill.
No. So his skill is evident, but those two guys are so good that as a rookie, he's probably not going to unseat them based on skill alone. Because again, those two guys are so incredibly good.
ESPN has him at 73.
Yes, that's what makes it a spicy take.
That's pretty spicy.
That's a pretty good one, right?
That's pretty spicy. All right, my second one is Najee Harris being a top 12 back. We've already seen Najee.
You're going like all the way to the top. You're saying, miss me with this mild bullshit. No, we're going Pepper X.
So here's the thing: we've already seen Najee Harris kill it in, when he had Ben Roethlisberger throwing him the ball, because he's a PPR machine, and he's in a contract year. And what do the Steelers do with running backs in a contract year? They run the legs off of them and move on to the next guy the next year. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell already. And Najee has the best quarterback he's had in the last, 4 or 5 years?
Which is
ever since he had Big Ben?
Crazy low bar.
I know. Russell Wilson is not a great quarterback, but he's still better than anything he's had in the last
I feel so bad for the Steelers
4 or 5 years.
So bad.
Najee's a volume guy. He's going to get the touches. They're going to run him until he breaks. He's pretty durable. So I don't see him breaking, but they're going to run the crap out of him, and he is a PPR machine, which means he's going to get those extra 4 or 5 catches a game.
Yeah,
so tell me why I'm stupid and I'm a moron and why I'm wrong.
Hey, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I'm playing devil's advocate. You know what I mean? But I'm just throwing, like, this is why it might not happen. That's all. So why it might not happen? And I'm not saying it's not, because I could definitely see it. He was a first-round pick for a reason. The Steelers finally invested in the offensive line, so the blocking should be a lot better, just like you mentioned. And yes, it is an incredibly low bar to clear, but Russell Wilson, even at this stage in his career, is better than is better than Kenny Pickett. He is better than Mason Rudolph. Duck Hodges. I mean, it's not exactly a murderer's row of QBs.
I don't think Hodges didn't he retire?
I think he's still kicking around somewhere, but let's not look up Duck Hodges. We don't need that.
I think
all respect to Duck Hodges. We don't need that. All right. I could see it though. That's all I'm saying. I could see it. All right. My next one. All right, I waffled a little bit on this one. I originally had him in our write-up of this episode that I sent you. I had him top 20, but I'm changing it.
You making it spicier? Because I wholeheartedly disagree with this take.
Do you know which one it is? Which one do you think it is?
Is it Tony Pollard?
It is. Yes.
Yeah,
no. My boy Tony Pollard.
Nope. I'm out.
I'm saying top 15.
Nope.
Top 15 all day.
I'm out.
All right.
ESPN's got him at 30, my guy.
I know. Oh, trust me, I know. That's why it's spicy. We gotta put some spice on it. I can't just go with the rankings.
Oh.
And again, so this is not necessarily where I rank them. Okay. Like if I was drafting, right, some of these guys I wouldn't take Tony Pollard over some of these guys. But you want spicy, I give you spicy. So here are the running backs in the 15 to 20 range. We got Josh Jacobs at ESPN, 15. What's he got around him? He's got Marshawn Lloyd, A.J. Dillon. Jacobs didn't look all that great last year either. I know Pollard himself, he wasn't great last year. But from week 11 on, when he said he was finally feeling more like himself, more explosive after that horrible leg injury he had in the playoffs the previous year, he was PFF's, I think, 3rd graded running back from week 11 on, when he said himself he felt more explosive. Second, the Titans offense is finally investing in the offensive line. And not to mention, they have a more modern play caller. Now I can see Pollard or Tajay Spears. The coaching staff has said in interviews they view these guys as kind of interchangeable. So, yeah, they're probably going to siphon work off one another. But this is why it's spicy. What if Tony Pollard is the same guy we saw in 2022 when he was one of the most explosive and efficient running backs in the NFL? What if that guy is back? Which, I don't know if you saw the Titans preseason games. He looked explosive again. And that was what was missing from him last year. Not to mention, like, the vibes in Dallas, man, it's not great. So he's in Tennessee, which I'm not saying the vibes are perfect, but they have a better play caller than they've had.
They've got a quarterback that puts mayonnaise in his coffee, my guy.
He does, but he also throws the ball deep. He look, I'm not saying that he's a great QB, but the defense better damn well respect that deep ball. Yeah, he led the NFL in ADOT last year. That man is chucking it, and I love it. I love to watch it. As a Titans fan, I probably would be frustrated seeing my guy average, 11-yard ADOT. But as a neutral observer of the sport, I love it. So let me tell you why I think Pollard could be 15-ish. So the guys in that area are guys like James Cook, who James Cook is running back 12 right now on ESPN. People are talking about Ray Davis taking his job. What if Ray Davis takes his job? Let's see, Joe Mixon. When was the last time Joe Mixon was special?
I don't think Joe Mixon's ever really been special.
Exactly. Pollard has been special. Now, it wasn't a timeshare with Zeke, but Pollard has shown us that he's explosive and efficient. You got running back 14, Rachaad White. That man averaged 3.6 yards a carry last year. And then the coaching staff drafted Bucky Irving, who, shout out Pro Ducks, Go Ducks. He has been, the coaching staff loves him. They have complimented him at every turn on how decisive a runner he is. And if you watch his running style versus Rachaad White's, you see the difference. Rachaad White likes to dance in the backfield a little bit. If he's just not a very decisive runner, and that's okay. I'm not saying you have to be, but with an offensive line like the Bucs, you do have to be a decisive runner.
But are you doing a take on a Bucs running back right now, or are you talking about Tony
Pollard? I'm telling you why I think that Pollard could finish top 15 by making cases against the guys above 15. We know Pollard's skill level. That's not in question. We saw it in Dallas. We saw it in 2022. We saw it in 2021. When even then it looked like he was the much better running back than Zeke Elliott. But because Dallas was paying Zeke $15 million a year, they played him more. Yeah, so we saw a healthy Pollard and what he can do. Now I'm telling you why he could finish top 15. All it takes is him getting back to that level, and he's going to, like, if 2022 Pollard walks through Tennessee's door, they love Tyjae Spears, and rightfully so. I think Tyjae Spears is a fantastic player. But if 2022 Pollard shows up, you're probably giving Pollard the not vast majority. He's never going to be an 80% type guy, but you're probably skewing that right now. It's like 55-45. You're probably skewing it more to like 65-35. And that's where you could get a top 15 season from him.
Okay. I think what scares me a little bit about Tony Pollard is it feels very Miles Sanders to Carolina.
Hey, that's why it's a spicy take, man. You know, like the history of running back switching teams is not great.
Levis has a cannon, and while he's no longer he's I got a joke here. He's no longer slinging it to Gia Duddy, but he's still got play. They brought in players like Ridley. He's got Hopkins. Treylon Burks is still a fantastic receiver and is number 3 option. Chig Okonkwo is a fantastic.
Bro, we're not doing the Burks thing. We're not doing the Burks thing in the year 2024, man.
Burks is a great receiver.
No,
he's just buried behind Ridley and Hopkins, okay?
He's buried behind Ridley, Hopkins, whatever's left of Tyler Boyd. Like, that man is not seeing the field.
Well, I mean, Boyd's never going to line up outside like Burks would anyways. Boyd is your prototypical slot guy. He's never moving.
Burks would be best in the slot. Anyways, let's get to the receiver takes. I have one that I'm really excited about. Let me hit you with it because you're in a couple fantasy football leagues with me, so you might already know what it is. All right, we're about to get real spicy because I love this player. Rome Odunze, number 1 receiver on the Bears by season's end.
Okay, but it's the Bears, and they've got Caleb. You could catch 10 passes and be first on the team.
No. I'm saying he's going to be their number 1 receiver by season's end. Not the number 1 in fantasy, although I do think that's also the case.
Yeah, this is a fantasy show. What are you doing?
Look, if he's their number 1 receiver, my man is going to be the number 1 receiver you want on the team in fantasy too. I am leaving every draft I can with Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze, again, shout out Matt Harmon, the Reception Perception profile. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. He broke down Rome Odunze's profile. And unfortunately for me as an Oregon fan, I had to watch Rome Odunze dunk on my Ducks twice last year. So thanks for that, Rome. Still love you as a person, though. Anyways, Odunze's college profile, it showed a technician, right? He had an all-green route tree. That went viral. The man was above league average every single route. His percentile success rates against man, press, and zone, all over the 80th percentile. He was a fantastic route runner. Now, people like myself included, I didn't realize this about Odunze. He is also fantastic after the catch. when he got in space, right? Because we all think of the Washington offense as contested balls down the sideline to Odunze that he wins with late hands or technician, whatever.
Yeah.
He can do that. He's a contested catch menace. The RP profile had him catching 89% of his contested catches, which is just absolutely stupid. Well, what people like myself didn't realize was when he got into space, he was hard to bring down. He went down on first contact on the relatively few plays he was classified as in space, not because of anything he did, but that's just the offense that Washington ran was a very vertical NFL-style offense.
Right.
He went down on first contact less than half the time. So now let's paint this whole picture, right? So I give you a receiver who is 6'3". He is 220 pounds. He was a sprinter in college and ran a 4.45 at that size. He is a technician who wins to all three levels, medium, deep, short. It don't fucking matter. He has late hands. He has outstanding contested catch capability. He lined up almost exclusively at X receiver at Washington. And, oh, by the way, he's extraordinarily difficult to tackle after the catch. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to walk in there and overtake DJ Moore right now, right? I think we can all agree.
That's a tall task.
It is. But I think he's going to do it. And then that's nothing against DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore, especially last year when he had, almost 1,400 yards on a basically non-existent passing game, he's a great player. I just think Odunze's profile is so good. And he showed the production at Washington. It was an NFL-style offense. This isn't like some receiver from Tennessee like Jalen Hyatt who killed it in his last year, but he's never done NFL receiver things. This is a guy who was doing NFL receiver things. He was beating press coverage. He was doing all these things in a very good defensive conference last year. I mean, he made Kyrie Jackson, Oregon's corner, who went in the fourth round. He burned him multiple times, and he was a good prospect. Yep. It didn't matter who he had on him. Even in the Michigan game, he didn't put up great stats, but that wasn't through any fault of his own. If you go back and watch that game, he's open. He's the only player who can get open. And we're talking about a Michigan offense featuring Mikey Sanderstill, who was picked in the second round by the Commanders. We're talking about a Michigan defense that had Will Johnson, who's going to be a top 10 pick next year at corner, who already had a pick 6 this past weekend. Like, that secondary is really freaking good, and he was destroying them. They just couldn't protect Penix long enough for it to hold up.
He's also about 5 inches taller than DJ Moore, so that gives him help. I don't have faith that Caleb Williams is going to be able to go through enough reads to get to Odunze. He's still going to have Keenan Allen
number
there
one
in the
read.
slot.
You don't need no other reads.
Exactly. But he's got to get there first, right?
He's going to be the number one read. That's what I'm telling you.
I don't know that they would move on from DJ Moore like that. Especially,
they won't move on from him. But here's what I keep coming back to.
Plus, there's still Dante Pettis. You can't discount Dante Pettis.
That's true. I would never discount Dante Pettis. But here's what I keep coming back to. If a receiver is that dude, he's gonna get his work. Look at CeeDee Lamb a couple of years ago. People discounted him because that Cowboys team already had Amari Cooper, who the Cowboys had just paid and just traded a pick for like a year and a half before that. Couple picks, actually. And they had Michael Gallup, who had done very well.
Rest in peace, Michael Gallup.
Yep. It was fun while it lasted, though. But anyways, that team, everybody said, CeeDee Lamb's not going to get the work. He's been drafted as the number 3 receiver. It's stupid to pick a guy in the first round. By mid-season, that dude was the guy.
Well,
because it became clear that he was the guy. Yep. We even saw this a couple years ago with Justin Jefferson. That Vikings team had Adam Thielen. Now everybody was assuming, that rookie's not going to come in and overtake Adam Thielen, who they had just extended at that point. About 6 games in, Justin Jefferson took that mantle and is now the highest paid receiver in the league in history.
I hate hearing about that and being reminded about that because I drafted Justin Jefferson in his rookie year. I took him with one of my last picks. And when he didn't do anything the first 2 weeks, I dropped him for somebody else. So it's like, hey, it's time to move on.
We all have
as soon as I dropped him, I'm gone. All right, Rome Odunze, I can see it. I don't think that's too super spicy, but
This is pretty spicy. I mean, to get to say, I'm not even saying like, I'm saying by the end of the year he'll be a top 10 receiver overall because that Bears offense, I think I have a lot of faith in them.
Okay, so you're claiming top 10 in fantasy points over the
Over
last
the
few
last half of the
weeks.
year, I don't think he's going to
Last
take
half.
over. I don't think he's going to take over early enough to be a top 10 overall receiver.
Right, right, right. I'm not saying that. I was thinking more like weeks 14 on. He could
Top
be a number
10,
one.
top 10, baby.
Okay. All right. Speaking of Washington and the offense they had, uh, their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, is now the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. And this is where it comes in for my first wide receiver hot take. It's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Knew
Going to
it.
be a top 24. Current ADP is at 98 right now. Look,
No, dude, you got to spice that up. Spice it up. Talk me into Jackson Smith and Jigba in the top 12. Can you
top
do it?
12. I don't know. I don't know if I can do top 12. I can do top 24 though. Lockett's already dealing with a leg injury, so that'll bump him up to wide receiver number 2 on that team. He already finished last year top 10 in first read targets on third down. He's Geno Smith's safety guy. Like, hey, I need a first down. I'm going to Jackson Smith and Jigba. They've got an insane level of trust between the two. And he hit that 90 target mark for rookies last year. And we see over 60% of sophomore wide receivers who hit that number as a rookie, over 60% increase that number. And when you're increasing 90 to, let's say he gets 110 targets, now you're talking close to 1,000 yards, right? Plus, you've got your new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who had the top passing offense in all of college football
And
in
his
passing
offense
and
is
total
built,
yards in
it's
2022.
built more vertical. So one of the reasons that JSN didn't do as well last year was because
they kept throwing it to him behind the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
And anybody with eyes and a brain could see that that's not where Jackson Smith and Jigba dominates. The man dominates down the field. He always has. That's what he did at Ohio State. Why are you throwing him a screen?
Yep. Slants. Throw slants. Get him something. Get him something.
Get him the ball.
I know the usual flow here is that I tell you why I don't think it'll happen. I love this take. I'm going to helium your take up.
It's more of a feelings for me than stats, but yeah.
I think man, you know stats. That's there. I think you could go top 20.
I mean, top 20 and top 24. It's still a wide receiver 2 on your team. So.
I think Ivy's listening to this podcast, and yeah, she was like, I wonder why he wants JSN. I didn't want to blow up your spot too much, so I didn't tell her. But I love JSN as a prospect, and then last year, on the superficial stuff, on the surface stats like targets per route run and all that stuff, it's not great. But at the same time, he was dealing with the offense. It wasn't great. Like their offensive line was essentially non-functional. It was really bad.
He was the fourth option.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, of course he's the fourth. He's a rookie who had a hand injury in camp, so it limited his ability to get up to speed. He didn't have a full camp. And he's competing against DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's one of the most underrated receivers of our generation.
Have a fantastic running back in Kenneth Walker.
Exactly. And they spent a second on Zach Charbonnet. So I love it. I love this take. But I'm going to hit you with my next spicy one.
You're going to hate my next take, though.
I don't think so. All right. So I again, when you talk yourself into something, right? Mm-hmm. So I know I sent this to you, and I said
I try to do that with my wife all the time, but it doesn't work. But go ahead.
Well, you must not be persuasive enough because it works every time for me. I'm just kidding, Ivy. Please don't.
Roll a d20 and I lose every time.
Please don't kill me. Fail. All right. I know I actually didn't have this one on here, but the more I thought about it, the more that I wanted to highlight this because I was talking with my brother about this player.
Oh, so it's somebody you didn't think about And right, so I could rebuttal it.
Yes.
Okay, so okay.
But let me make my case. So Deontay Johnson, we're going mega spicy here. So Deontay Johnson right now on ESPN is the wide receiver 35.
I ain't touching
That's crazy to me. Deontay Johnson is.
I think that's too high.
Too high, sir. You ain't heard my take yet. I think he's going to be a wide receiver one.
Top 12.
Top 12. And here's why. So the Carolina offense last year was non-functional. They had a bad offensive line.
Still is.
Their offensive coordinator was terrible. Bryce Young did not look good. But mostly it was because the receivers were awful. They could not beat man coverage. Adam Thielen.
Dare you besmirch Adam Thielen like that?
Hold on, I was going to give Adam Thielen a shout out. Adam Thielen over the first half last year was a top 10 receiver. He was a top 10 receiver. Adam Thielen, 32-year-old Adam Thielen. Deontay Johnson is better, I think we can all agree, than last year's version of Adam Thielen. On every advanced metric that you want, which tracks open rates and all that stuff, Deontay Johnson's been top 10 in ESPN's open rate for 3 straight years, including one year he was first overall. The man is a high-level separator. And I'm not saying he's a perfect player, but when you think about the infrastructure of Carolina's offense, this dude is going to get 150 to 170 targets because there's no one else there. Bryce Young is in his second season. They spent heavily to improve the offensive line. He now has a real coach in Dave Canales who resurrected Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith's careers. I'm not saying that Bryce Young is going to be a top 10 QB, but he doesn't have to be for this take to be correct. He just has to be okay because they love Deontay Johnson. And if you have 160 targets, that's almost 10 targets a game. That's 9 and change per game. You are almost guaranteed to finish a wide receiver one unless the offense is quarterbacked by Zach Wilson. The only reason I say that is because Garrett Wilson had that 160 targets last year. He didn't finish close to a wide receiver one because it was Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle. I don't care what you think about Bryce Young. He's going to be better than that in his second season in the NFL, quarterbacked or with a real offensive-minded head coach. And now he has a receiver that can actually do something called get open.
You mean Adam Thielen?
No, dude, Adam Thielen. I'm sorry, that ship has sailed.
Don't dunk on Adam Thielen. Old man Thielen still got it.
Time comes for us all, man. I love Adam Thielen as a player, but time comes for us all. And Adam Thielen's time, unfortunately, as a number one receiver in this league, has come and passed. Deontay Johnson's has not. Like, look at Deontay Johnson the last couple of years in Pittsburgh. I think we can all agree that Deontay Johnson, he was not the issue. It was Kenny Pickett, and the overall infrastructure of the Pittsburgh offense was terrible.
Yeah.
And now he's just dropped into an offense where he's the clear number one option. And if you want to hear about like somebody that loves a player, if you look at Dave Canales and his quotes on Deontay Johnson, he was asked about the passing offense and how it's going to be. And he literally said, basically it boils down to where's Deontay at. That sounds like a coach that is going to feed this guy a 30-something% target share.
Sounds like the preseason hype train is off the rails, and that's coach speak. But you have to have confidence in Bryce Young, and I don't have any confidence in Bryce Young.
You don't really have to have that much confidence in him.
I haven't seen anything from him. You know, Deontay Johnson was a number one wide receiver when he had Big Ben throwing him the ball. He hasn't done anything since. And
that's because Kenny
He's
Pickett
about half the size, you know.
The man gets open.
Bryce Young's about half the size of Big Ben, so.
The man gets open. So anyways, hit me with this last receiver take.
That is a very spicy take. Okay. Nico Collins outside the top 30.
Outside the top 30.
Outside the top 30. He won't be a wide receiver 1, 2. He might be a flex guy.
All right, this is a very spicy take.
You're bringing in Stephon Diggs. and we see it everywhere Diggs goes. He is a target share monster. He's a hog. He demands the ball, and that's why he's on his third team now, in my opinion, at least. But Diggs had 107 targets last year. Nico Collins had 80. You still have Tank Dell there, who set the Texans wide receiver rookie record for touchdowns, and only played 11 games. Now he's Stroud's BFF, and while Nico Collins had a good year last year, you're just going to see the target share just drop significantly. I think with the addition of Stephon Diggs, you've got a better running game now. You brought in what's his name?
Joe Mixon.
Joe Mixon. Thank you.
Yeah.
So forgettable. I gotta be careful.
It's better than what they had last year.
Him and his sister might shoot me. Anyways, but yeah, I'm calling Nico Collins outside the top 30. It's more of a feeling type spicy take than anything backed, because to be honest, Nico Collins had a fantastic year last year, doing what he did on only 80 targets.
So here's where I'm gonna disagree strongly.
I know Nico Collins is one of your guys.
Nico Collins, I love Nico Collins. All right, so again, we're going back to that RP profile. And a quick note, by the way, he had 80 catches. He had 109 targets.
You're right. I did write down catches 107 to 80, and said targets. So
so that is a very spicy take, and I would disagree on that one. I don't know how that happens. Nico crushed man coverage. So here's the thing with Nico, and why I think he actually ends up outperforming last year. My bold take is he outperforms last year. Both Dell and Diggs, especially Diggs at this point in his career, they are better suited for the flanker slot roles. Nico Collins is huge. He's 6'4", 222. The man destroys press man coverage. He had 96th percentile success rates against press, 94th against man. That is elite shit. That's the type of guy you line up outside and you say, go run deep routes, go run in-breaking routes. And that's exactly what he did. Now, my theory on why the Texans brought in Diggs is because secretly that offense on 3rd and 4th down by EPA and success rate weren't very good. They were actually in the 20s because both Dell and Collins do their best work in the intermediate to deep portions of the field. Diggs, in his RP profile, he took a step back on deep stuff. He was all red in those areas. He lost a little bit of a step, but Diggs is still a master level technician of getting open and was green everywhere in the underneath range. So I think that they brought in Diggs because he's still a good player. That's not to say he's not a good player, but the Diggs of old, the Diggs of 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, he was in the 90-plus percentile against man, press, and zone. He's one of the only guys to ever do one season where he had the 90-plus percentile against all three. He's not that guy anymore. He's still good. He's in like the 70th percentile, so I'm not saying he's bad. But
I don't think he has to be that guy anymore.
Nico Collins was far and away the better player and is the perfectly suited X receiver for that offense. And that's why I think he actually is on the field and does the best out of the three.
Okay.
And if during the preseason, and I know it's preseason, right? We're not going to really know until we get a couple games of data.
Yeah.
But when CJ Stroud was on the field, Tank Dell had like a 60-something% snap rate. He basically only was out there in 3 receiver sets. Nico Collins had a 95% snap rate. He was out there all the time. He was their number one receiver by far. They paid him. Whereas with Diggs, they redid his contract, so he is in a contract year. They clearly have no intention of keeping him beyond this season.
Which means they're going to use the crap out of him, right?
Well, are they going to use the crap out of him, or are they going to use the crap out of the guy that just paid and just had a fantastic season for them last year? I think Diggs brings something that they don't have right now to that offense. I think Diggs is, again, he's a useful player, but I also don't think Diggs is going to be the focal point like he was in Buffalo the last couple of years.
Well, this is why I'm a moron with a mic. Give me
But
a tight end.
That was a spicy as shit take, sir. That was the spiciest take of the day. We gotta record this, put like the spiciest take of the day thing in there. You know what I mean? Like the Pepper X. This is like a 2.69 million Scoville unit take. That is a hot one. And I hope it doesn't come true because that would screw some fantasy teams of mine. Anyways, the tight end takes. I got 2 of them for you. I'm gonna hit you with the less bold one first.
Okay.
This is like a mild one. This is something that Elise could eat. My daughter, she could take this take. I'm gonna go Dalton Kincaid, the overall tight end 1.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I see it. I mean, you've seen me draft Kincaid and pair him with Josh Allen everywhere I could to get that stack. So
let me make my case real quick. Since we're both in agreement, I'm not going to make it too bad. So from week 10, I think it was, onward, Dalton Kincaid had 2 weeks where he finished outside of tight end 10. He had multiple weeks inside the top 5. And that was with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs both on the team. That is hundreds of targets vacated. The wide receiver room in Buffalo, I'm not saying it doesn't have promise, but it's much less imposing than it was before. You have Khalil Shakir. You have Curtis Samuel. You have Keon Coleman. You have a bunch of guys, but do you have any dudes? Nope. And here's the other thing with tight ends.
The difference between dudes and guys is
it's a big one. You want dudes. You don't want guys. Come on. Yeah. Just a guy. I like Curtis Samuel. I think he's a better player than people give him credit for, but the NFL has made it pretty clear what they think of him. So Dalton Kincaid, his case rests on touchdown regression to the mean. He only had like 3 touchdowns last year, I think it was. With the amount of targets he's going to get, you would expect that to go up. Touchdowns are mostly about right place, right time, not as much about skill.
Right.
Another thing, tight ends' most valuable targets, you don't want to draft tight ends that are lining up in line. It's why Michael Mayer wasn't a great pick last year. It was clear the Raiders were going to use him as an inline tight end. They weren't going to use him flexed out in the slot. Dalton Kincaid led NFL tight ends in his percentage of snaps in the slot once Dawson Knox went down the first time, and he continued that after Dawson Knox came back. They clearly view him, and this is what his college tape said he should be, as a move tight end, as a flexed out tight end that you use over the middle of the field. I think with another year under his belt, because Sam Laporta was great last year, but Sam Laporta blew away any previous rookie tight end season with his 890 yards and 10 touchdowns. Nobody's ever done that in the modern era.
Rookie tight ends don't do anything unless your name is Sam Laporta.
Kincaid had almost 700 yards, which, it's not Laporta, but it's not that far off either.
Oh. I mean, Pitts had 1,000 yards his rookie season?
It's not 1,000 yards, but only 1 touchdown somehow. That was a crazy year. All right, but anyways, yeah, that's my case for Kincaid. He's going to have a shit ton of targets.
For me on that.
Yep.
I have nothing to add. You killed it. Tight end was hard for me. Tight end is just so thin all the time that it's hard to really come up with something spicy. But I'm going to try and spice it up a little bit. And I'm going to call Mark Andrews being outside the top 10 tight ends.
Outside the top 10?
Outside the top 10. Just
now, is this with injury? Are you calling an injury?
Huh?
Are you calling an injury?
No.
Outside top 10? No injury. Okay, let's hear it.
So we saw what Zay Flowers could do last year. They're going to build on that. His emergence is fantastic for that team. And Lamar is typically a one-read guy. They added Derrick Henry, who, even though he's old now, he's still Derrick Henry, and he's still going to give you some really good games, and he opens it up a little bit more for Lamar to run. So I'm looking at Mandrews as now being option number 4 Whereas for the majority of Lamar's career with him, he was option number one. And it's just a feeling thing with me.
Yeah.
Just seeing what they're bringing in and the historical, how Lamar likes to play quarterback. History shows us that he can't support more than one receiving option.
So I can expand on that, but I also want to make a point about that because I think Lamar Jackson is very underrated as a passer. You got to remember, for his first few years, his top receivers were like Willie Snead. Greg Roman was his offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's the big killer right there, and that's why.
Thanks for reminding me of that as a Chargers fan. I get that to look forward to in my life.
Poor Herbert.
But last year, again, they tried to bring in receivers. Rashad Bateman, who was a very good prospect, hurt majority of the year. He started to look a bit more explosive towards the end. But it was also Todd Monken's first year. He's still learning. So I think that your take is spicy, but I could definitely see it happening based on the fact that Zay Flowers' role is going to expand. I think you have to throw the ball to Bateman more often because Bateman showed really well. And then also Andrews at this point in his career, I think he might get the Chiefs' Travis Kelce treatment where he gets load managed a little bit. I don't think he's going to be, and this, like, they've never put him out there for 90% of the snaps.
Right.
They've always given him breathers, and this is the main piece that I could definitely see your take happening.
Isaiah Likely is super talented too.
Exactly. But really, they know that Andrews is awesome, and they're going to want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So what? Baltimore wins 12 games, 13 games. They want to be ready for the playoffs. They want to be healthy for the playoffs. I could definitely see a world where Baltimore gives him a 55%, 60% snap share just because they don't need to give him more because the rest of the team is so good that they can afford to make sure he's still healthy and load manage him. Yeah. I could definitely see it.
Yeah. Plus, and Eagles fans are going to hate me for this. Plus, you still got one of the GOATs in Nelson Aguilar there. So
yeah, that's true. I mean,
maybe Mandrews is option number 5.
Let's not get crazy. All right, when he's on the field, how often is he on the field? All right, my last tight end take, our last take of the day, really. Evan Engram outside the top 10.
Oh, I'm so glad you didn't go with the other one.
Well, now I want to switch it.
I'm so glad you didn't go with Taysom Hill. That was such a dumb one. Go ahead.
Nope.
Talk to me about Evan Engram.
I'm switching it up. Sorry, listeners at home. I've been challenged, and I have to do this. So the other take that I mentioned him, Taysom Hill is a back-end tight end 1. And I'll tell you why. Last year, Taysom Hill finished as a half PPR tight end 11. And it's like none of you even care.
You're talking half PPR now?
Hey, hold on. I'm making the case. Let me make my case now. Now we're talking back end tight end 1. I'm talking, tight end 8, 9, that range, right? I'm not talking top 5 tight end. So it doesn't need to have a great year. But how many times in the past have we seen Taysom Hill line up Wildcat QB and take the goal line snaps? That dude's going to score touchdowns. That dude is going to score touchdowns. And if you look at his preseason usage, he was used freaking everywhere. Everywhere. Tight end, halfback, fullback, Wildcat QB. The Saints have also, and this is really what drives this argument for me. The Saints offense last year was run by Pete Carmichael, I think. He is an acolyte of the Sean Payton era. He'd been on the Saints staff for decades. The Saints staff, aside from Sean Payton leaving in 21, had basically no significant turnover. It was all the same ideas. Joe Lombardi, Pete Carmichael, it was all the same stuff. Well, that stuff was stale as shit 10 years ago. But you had Drew Brees, so it didn't really matter.
Right.
Well, they don't have Drew Brees anymore. And they have a terrible offensive line now, whereas 10 years ago they had a great offensive line. So those ideas, they didn't work out. Well, now they have an actual offensive coordinator who has brought new ideas into the system, and they still adore Taysom Hill. If you want to talk about a coach in Dennis Allen, who talks about other players, shits on him constantly in the media. You want to get praise out of Dennis Allen? It's like trying to impress your father. It just doesn't happen. Unless your name is Taysom Hill, in which case he absolutely loves you.
I feel like there's some underlying issues there that we might want to talk about after the show.
No, let's not talk about him. But anyways, in which case he loves Taysom Hill. You listen to how he talks about A.T. Perry. You listen to how he talks about Kendre Miller. You listen to how he talks about basically anybody else on that team other than Taysom Hill. And that man, I swear to you, I would not be surprised if he had adopted Taysom Hill in this offseason. Swear to God. It does not take a lot to finish as tight end 9 or 10. And I think Taysom Hill hits that.
But let's talk about Taysom Hill's last 3 years. 3 years ago, he put up 143 fantasy points. He was the tight end 12. 2 years ago, put up 145 fantasy points, was the tight end 9. Last year, put up 121 fantasy points. It's the tight end 19.
Yep.
He is a 34-year-old gadget player.
Yes.
He is going to be 35 this year.
Yep.
And you're telling me that 35-year-old Taysom Hill is going to put up
dramatically overperform his
back end tight end 1.
Yes.
I disagree.
Yes,
I think his time's over. I think
spicy takes, buddy.
I think his age catches up with him. I think we saw that with his 20-point drop off between 2022 and 2023.
20 points is about a point a game. And he did miss some games last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Listen, it's still 20 points. That drops you from tight end, 10 to tight end 20.
Right, but we're talking about 20 points. That's 3 touchdowns.
And he's still got Dennis Allen. You talk about how Dennis Allen loves him and praises him, but it's still Dennis Allen.
Right, but that's why it's a spicy take. He's not being drafted that way. And I don't necessarily think it does happen, but my spicy take is I could see it. I can absolutely see it. It does not take a lot to finish as a tight end 9 or tight end 10 or hell, tight end 11, as we saw with Taysom Hill himself. 145 points, you're pretty much there.
Fair enough. All right, my last take of the day before we cut off here. It's not too spicy. This is more of a mild take. And that's going to be Jake Ferguson, Dallas's tight end, being a top 5 tight end this year. And
it's pretty spicy with the tight ends that are out there right now. That's pretty good.
Understand. But last year was Ferguson's first full year as the starting tight end. Right? And he finally got the starting nod. He was Dak's BFF. Dak started 17 games last year. And Ferguson was tight end 9. Let's go back to 2021. Let's talk about the guy they had before Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, who's now with Houston. Dalton Schultz in 2021 was the tight end 3. Why? Because Dak Prescott loves a good tight end.
Yeah, he does love his seam routes. That man loves his seam routes.
Exactly. And now you have the retirement of Michael Gallup. That's 50. Michael Gallup got 57 targets last year.
Did he really get that many?
57? 57 targets last year.
What?
Where is that 57 targets going to go to? Is it going to go to Brandon Cooks? Is it going to go to Tolbert, Zeke? I think it goes to his favorite outlet, and that's going to be tight end.
It's going to go Rico Dowdle, buddy. Rico Dowdle season.
If anything, it'll go to who's that really short guy they got? I can't think of names right now.
Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, Deuce.
Deuce Vaughn, yeah.
There's a joke somewhere in there about tight ends and a deuce, but I'm just gonna leave that alone. That's all we have for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Morons with a Mic. As you can tell, he's the number savant. I am the feelings guy. And we'll catch you next time.